Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here with the big takeaways of week 9 of the NFL season. Still got Monday night to go, but hey, good there. All right, the first one. Terrace Marshall had a bit of a breakout. A couple weeks in a row now. He's playing over 90% of the snaps. Overall, things have looked better. Last year, he was not a good football player, but I think that he really upped whatever he did, figured some things out. Last week, catches 4 passes for 87 yards against the Bengals. This week against the Bengals. It's late, it's garbage time, but regardless, 53 yards and a touchdown. That's 2 good games in a row of performance. Can it all go away quickly? Definitely can. Yeah, we'll be hearing about Justin Fields. That'll be coming up soon, no doubt. So anyway, Terrace Marshall, though, he is a player who is available in many leagues, the hyper-competitive leagues. He's been gone last week once he did something. I know in a lot of leagues, he's gone, but I think he's still out there in a lot of leagues. And again, if you're in a 12-team league, you need flex help, bye week help, injury help. That's what I'm talking for Terrace Marshall. Look, DJ Moore's had plenty of struggle weeks. So I'm not going to say Terrace Marshall's going to put 50 yards a week the rest of the way. But again, just know your league parameters. If you're desperate for wide receiver help, he definitely could come on as the season moves forward. The disappointments of this week. So James Conner's healthy now. They definitely didn't rush him back. They gave him time to get over that rib injury, which was great. But I think we can officially say that the version of James Conner from last year will not be back in 2022. That's sad because Conner was kind of what I expected him to be last year. He was a running back that's a battering ram, and he's fairly elusive for his size. And also last year, he didn't have blocking last year. So the fact he doesn't have blocking this year really was nothing different. Now, I think that last year the Cardinals did a better job of spreading the field out. They had to be taken more seriously with DeAndre Hopkins, who is now back. But again, I just don't see anything in Conner's game right now that makes me think that there's going to be any elevation of things. His yardage yet was decent. He had a lot of it in garbage time yesterday. So even the yardage he had done very little in most of the game. So look, a volume-based, low-end running back 2 in 12-team leagues, he's going to get you 40 to 60 yards a week. He's not finding the end zone because they're not in the red zone a whole lot. So something to consider there. But nonetheless, otherwise flex option. But if things turn around, I'll be happy to say that they're turning around. I just don't see anything that reasonably makes me believe that's about to happen. Hopefully next year works out for James Conner. He gets a little bit older and running backs not so good, but we'll hope. And look, that Rams and Buccaneers game, honestly, in most 12-team leagues, you're either benching Brady and Stafford if you're not outright cutting them, if you have another option. Really, there's going to be no comeback for Brady this year. He had one game he threw for more than one touchdown. That was against Kansas City. Funny enough, that was the week I made the bold prediction on Sirius XM morning show on the Sunday, and I'm like, Brady's going to throw 3 touchdowns, and I was glad that one hit because there wasn't anything else following that up. Now, the offensive line isn't giving them time to throw. If you've listened to me regularly, you heard about the reasons I think some quarterbacks are struggling this year. No reason to get back into that for those that commonly listen. It's just defense are throwing a lot of stuff at offenses that they are not prepared for, and they're not going to fix it anytime soon. These big fixes in the NFL always come in the off season. They don't come week to week. And, again, I said Brady's offensive line, that's been problematic. And Brady's been on the wrong page with his receivers too frequently. That's been frustrating. Now, those who are optimists, and I'm a pretty big optimist, and I'm not personally holding this out, but if there are optimists out there, what the one thing of Brady you might hold on to is this: they have a week 10 bye. And sometimes teams can figure some things out during a bye week. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen. So if you're an optimist and you want to hold, then that's what you would hold for. Otherwise, like I said, Brady is cuttable because with 1 or 0 touchdowns in all but one game, there's just no upside there. And the floor is not good. And Stafford's the same thing. It's not turning around anytime soon. It's very unfortunate, but again, no protection, no running game. and it's just Cooper Kupp. Matter of fact, when I was looking at the box score yesterday, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but like Cooper Kupp had like 70% of the yardage. I don't think anybody else had 25 receiving yards. That's close. It's off the top of my head, but it was Kupp and then nobody else. That was crazy. And then there's a mixed message players. Amon-Ra St. Brown. So back in week 2, we remember he had that amazing game, 184 total yards, 2 touchdowns. And I know there were a number of people that were doing rest of season rankings. They wanted to get him in the top 10 players. And I understood, I get it, because he was so hot down the stretch last year. And then, a lot of times we thought that was because of Hockenson and Swift being out, and there was just a target void, and St. Brown filled him. And then after that big week 2 game, they're like, this is the real thing. Well, he had injuries. We get that, understand that. But now he's been healthy. The last 2 healthy games, 55 yards, 69 yards, and he doesn't have a touchdown. That's a small sample size. Next week, he can get 150 and 2 touchdowns. Not doubting it. But I think what we can definitively say is he's not going to be that weekly top 8 receiver. And we know nobody is, but I think people are beginning to think that about St. Brown, that he was like matchup proof and he was game script proof. And I think he's a very, very good receiver, and he'll be very productive for fantasy. Just saying that I don't think he's going to be that guy. You're not getting 100 yards a week and a touchdown out of him like he was getting down the stretch last year. But hey, no shakes. You've got him on your team. You're happy with him. You're starting him every week. You're waiting for the spike weeks because they will be there. It's a very good football player. Dolphins. So yesterday, again, I was on the 9 to 10 a.m. XM show on channel 87, and Alan Sosowski, my broadcasting partner, makes me do a bold call every week. I'm one that hates bold calls because I don't like hot takes, but he convinced me that, make a plausible bold call, something that could happen, and I've embraced that. So the bold call I made yesterday on the show was, I think Jeff Wilson is going to be the lead back in Miami, and Raheem Mostert is going to back him up. And the main reason was that Mostert has his most carries he's had in the season is 131. Well, he was on a pace to blow that away, and he was returning kickoffs. To me, Mike McDaniel had to know he was about to break down, but Chase Edmonds couldn't run that system. And so the problem became, what do we do? So now you got to play Raheem Mostert more. Well, the acquisition of Wilson, my opinion, was to make Mostert what he's best as, is changing the pace as a runner. And, Mostert was only like 4.5 yards per carry. His broken tackle rate, yards after contact, were not good. He's not having a good year in Miami. He put up some numbers, but they haven't been the big games, the big runs. Jeff Wilson was having a career year to the point when McCaffrey showed up 5.1 yards per carry, blew away anything in his career priors. He had 4 runs of over 20 yards. He had less than that in the 200 carries earlier in his career. So Wilson didn't have to learn the system because it's exactly the same system. So he was literally a plug and play player for them. And what do you know? And so funny, the bold call I gave was, Wilson takes the lead, and he did outsnap Mostert by 2 carries, but hey, it counts, right? And then I said he'd get about 75 yards and a good chance for a touchdown. Total yardage 74, and he got the touchdown. It was cool. Now, Mostert only had 26 yards in the game, and they had similar workloads. So just Wilson right now, and he just looks like a better football player. All right. I assume it'll be a split, though. It's still going to be a split. Wilson's not going to be like taking the full job. It's going to be at most 60-40, at most 55-45 is probably likely. And, since Mostert hasn't been very explosive, I think he's going to be more along the line of a flex option with the reduced workload, because I think now he gets 10 to 12 touches a week instead of 15 to 18. But Jeff Wilson should check in as an RB2 because that speed at receiver for Miami is going to make defenses have to focus on that every time. So despite the downgrade in offensive line, and San Francisco's line was beat up, but they just blocked that scheme so well. So Jeff Wilson's in good shape. So the mixed messages there from Raheem Mostert and then St. Brown. The huge fantasy day, and I know those Justin Fields fans are going to be, wait, I'm going to save this one for last. The huge fantasy day. So in the first half of the Raiders-Jaguars game, the Raiders did a great job of getting Davante Adams back on track. Now, the weird thing is, they abandoned it after halftime and they lost the game. I just don't understand Josh McDaniels and the coaching right now. It's just been not consistent, not good, not dynamic. But we had that great half of Adams, and the second half was really like nothing. And in the process, they alienated the rest of the team. So nothing was really working for the Raiders as they lose this game. They looked very good. They had a lead in the first half. They just really need to keep, building on what they had, and they did not do it. Derek Carr had, the first half, again, both touchdowns to Adams, and then that was it after that. Now, the renewed commitment to Adams is good. And don't forget now, Adams has at least 95 yards in 4 of the last 5 games. So he's not a bust. He had a bad game or two. And that last week where he had 2 catches for 17 yards. I know my broadcasting partner, Mario Puig, from the Saturday Series show, my RotoWire teammate as well, he thought that there was an illness running through the late Raiders locker room. I didn't hear much about that, but if that was true, that could have explained the 2 for 17 game against New Orleans, which is entirely possible. But nonetheless, again, I think right now, Josh McDaniels, I don't know if they're going to fire him. I don't think they would do that with what they paid him in the first season. But honestly, they've got to be thinking about it. He's got yelled at by the owner twice already, and losing to the Jaguars was definitely not something that put him on continued good footing. But like I said, Adams should be fine. Everybody else, good luck. Josh Jacobs, the work. He had those 3 great games. Still, obviously, you're starting him every week, still getting work, still a really good running back, but maybe those boom weeks aren't going to be sitting there. He had a good run in the schedule, too. Hunter Renfro's real tough to start right now, other than leagues where you have to start him because there's no other options. And, we don't know what's going on with Darren Waller, so not so much there. So, I can answer this question. This is about Renfro. So, you know what? I thought that when McDaniels came over, I thought what they would do is they would put Davante Adams on one side of the formation as your classic X receiver, at the line of scrimmage. And I assumed Renfro would be in a bunch set on the opposite side and just these lot of zone beaters. And I figured it would be a real easy acclimation. But basically, Josh McDaniels has just not weaponized his offense. He seems to not know what to do. In some ways, he has Jakob Johnson, the fullback, and he's utilizing him. And then there are some run looks that are similar to New England. But it's almost like because he has Adams, and Adams is just that classic X. It's almost like McDaniels hasn't had that and doesn't know what to do with the offense and the integration of everybody. So honestly, and you're right, there was always a slot presence, but the slot was the dominant player in the offense. And I don't believe McDaniels was there for the Randy Moss year. I believe that was before, but even so, Randy Moss was, he was not Davante Adams, a different type of player, but I don't think he was there then. So the slot was how they ran their offense. But now we're looking at an Adams-driven offense, or it should be. But it's just, I just don't think McDaniels has a clue of how to run an offense and integrate these things. Been frustrating. And then, wow, the Joe Mixon day. Wow. 5 touchdowns. Now, listen, he hadn't had more than 82 rushing yards in a game. I want to say it was maybe week 1. And then he hadn't had more than 30 receiving yards in any game this year. So now he comes out, and he only had 3 touchdowns all season. So basically, it was like the craziest of games because who saw that coming? Mixon's been very inefficient most weeks, and I know I mentioned that they did figure some things out by using shotgun and play action out of shotgun, and that was really helping their offense. But they got annihilated against Cleveland, and then they just come out and just light it on fire against the Panthers. And so here he goes. Rushes for 153 yards, another 58 through the air, and 5 touchdowns. So basically, look, we've known this about Mixon for years. Those upside crazy games are always there. They can be there at any time. He's a dynamically talented player. Week to week, we don't know what we're getting. But you know what? He's giving you enough every week that you're not regretting starting him. It's just a matter of when you get those spike games, and hopefully they come at the right time. But nonetheless, wheels up on Joe Mixon, at least on this week. But again, don't be surprised next week if he gets 65 total yards and doesn't score. All right, and then Justin Fields. So, wow. Rational coaching. We talked about this in the offseason, the full expectation I had that they were going to get him on the move, preset some routes for him to clearly define his reads, figure that was going to be a way of life. And things are working out. And it's beautiful. It's great to see Justin Fields with elite athleticism, 172 yards on the ground. And that's the thing. Like, there were times when they weren't all designed runs. Some of them were, but there were times when you just saw people were covering. And then because of the coverage, it was like, oh, got room to run. And he would just take off and go. Miami had no answer for him. Now, Fields has rushed for at least 80 yards in 3 of his last 4 games at a floor of 60. And that's been insanely good. So, and he threw 3 touchdowns yesterday. So realistically, with the running alone, he is a QB1, no question. And my rest of season rankings, and look, I know it sounds crazy, but you're running like that, I have you at QB5, because think of how many quarterbacks are uninspiring. Obviously, we mentioned Brady and Stafford. They're outside the top 12, and Aaron Rodgers way outside the top 12, and Russell Wilson gone, and Kyler Murray doesn't have many big weeks. 2 weeks ago, he had one. Last week was okay. Lamar Jackson hasn't been getting it done. And so we started just ruling out, and Justin Herbert, all the injuries and the way they run the offense there. I mean, Herbert's a beautiful quarterback, one of the best we know, but he's in a bad situation. So now you start peeling this away, and it's like, how do you not put Justin Fields running for that type of yardage? And with things open up, how do you not put him up there? So at this point, the people who cut him earlier, I was one of them in one league. Man, we could have had him back. I tried to get him back on waivers last week. I put in a bid for him, and obviously somebody bid up a bit higher, which is too bad because, man, he's a difference maker down the stretch. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you'd smash the like and subscribe button, I'd appreciate it greatly. I know some of us are on different forums and platforms here, so thank you for being here. I'm going to see what questions we have, and let's see what we got here. Got Raul. You've got his Judy, Palmer, and Foreman. Judy Palmer Foreman for Waddle, a decent offer. Jerry Judy's had a couple good games, but he hasn't been great otherwise. So, fine enough dumping him. And Palmer is going to have value, but at some point, Mike Williams will be back. And then Foreman's a strong player. So, yeah, I think that's a fair offer either way. Both ways, I think it is, because you give up a good player to get depth. All right. And what do we got here? Randy, all right. Who did I start? Taysom, or I don't like Likely tonight. I don't like it because the Saints give up less than 30 yards a game to tight ends. And my guess is they would have shut down Andrews pretty well. And I know Likely had the good game last week. Look, last week, it was very clear from the first snap of that game that the game plan to attack Tampa Bay was using the tight end. And so once Andrews went out, the game plan didn't change. It just went to Likely. So I would just say very simply that we're going Taysom Hill here, because they both have downside, but Hill has some significant upside. I don't know what Likely has against his defense. And rest of schedule, well, I assume Mark Andrews will be back. Apparently, if Harbaugh wasn't lying, it wasn't a serious injury. So then at that point, I guess it's Taysom Hill, just because Likely will get relegated to a lesser role. You can't, you're not going to run out tight ends at the expense of Andrews. He'll get some routes, but I don't think he'll anything consistent. Monday night game. So people want to talk about betting here. All right. So look, this is going to be a weird game. I ultimately, Lamar Jackson's rushing has not been super high. And I think in this game, they're going to have to. I think he's going to have to run, because realistically, no Rashad Bateman, no Mark Andrews. And the running game, it's a tough run defense. And Gus Edwards, I don't even know if Gus Edwards is playing. It's going to be a game-time decision, if even that. He's at the hamstring injury. My guess is he doesn't play. Kenyon Drake's not going to have any room to run against him, I should say. So what I'll say is this. I will say that Lamar Jackson has to run for a lot of yardage, because there's no other option. There's no other way they're going to move the ball. So the prop on him over would be good. But this is going to be a low-scoring game. I would definitely think that the Ravens score under their team total. Now, the Saints have a chance to do some things. I expect that the Ravens will come in and load up to stop Alvin Kamara on the ground, but I don't know they have an answer for him in the passing game. He's been getting 9 to 10 targets a game with Andy Dalton, and I expect that to continue. So, again, for a receiving prop, I would go over for Alvin Kamara. I would think that he has to go over, because that's kind of their offense. I think Chris Olave's in for a decent game, because the Baltimore corners will take chances, and Olave is – well, in the game, might not be high scoring. That might be the only caveat there. So I probably would stick more to Kamara on the over on the receiving yardage. I'd probably stick to the over on Lamar's rushing yardage. But overall, an under game. This has got to be an under game. I do think the Saints cover this thing. And the line moved a little bit. They were previously getting 2.5 when I got it. It's like 1 now, and that may have changed since. I still think the Saints come out and win this game. The Saints they have a little bit more stability, I believe, on both sides of the ball than the Ravens right now. The Ravens do kind of lose focus defensively at times. This is not the unit of the Ravens we're used to seeing in prior years. So I think that this is one that we're going to look at and say, you know what, the Saints probably win this thing. My guess on a score is going to be somewhere around the area of 19-13, somewhere right around there. But this should be an under game. Let's see. What do I think of this trade? Giving Ken Walker, Michael Pittman, and Judy, getting Aaron Jones, Amari Cooper, and Chris Olave. I think that's so Walker's putting up some big games. Aaron Jones, we don't know how his ankle is. I think that's the bigger question. They said he might play this week, but that doesn't mean anything at this point. He wasn't a boot after him. Now I like that he ran off the field, so maybe that is just a low ankle sprain, and we're going to be okay there. Pittman, I get worried now that they fired Frank Reich because I really don't know what we're going to get out of the Jeff Saturday coaching the team, former center, ESPN analyst, consultant to the team. I just think this team is going to get alienated very quickly. So I think you getting Cooper, Cooper probably does a lot better when we get not they can't do much better, 100-yard games most weeks, but it'll help when Watson's at quarterback. So I think you're good on this trade. I think giving up Walker's tough, but I think as long as Aaron Jones checks out, I would wait to see if you hear a little more about Aaron Jones. We're making this if Aaron Jones is shut down 3 weeks, all of a sudden you're short of running back and not so good. I think that's the only question that we have there. And then, and then the question, Kamara, 5 interceptions. Look, Dalton's throwing him 9-10 passes a game, so I've got to go over on that because that's just the mode of the offense right now. Drake, 44.5 yards. I would be inclined to go under. Remember, he just had like a 11 carry for 5-yard game like 2 games ago. Last week, he was fine in an easier matchup. Tampa Bay can't stop the run anymore, but the Saints can stop the run. And I don't think Kenny and Drake, you always risk when you're betting an under, right? The under is, oh my gosh, he broke a 25-yard run that we didn't see coming, and now he went over. That always is out there. That's why I hate unders with players. But nonetheless, I think the probabilities that play this game 10 times, there are 7 of those games that he goes under 44.5 yards. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Hope everybody has a good rest of your day. Remember, if we're on YouTube, if you hit the like and subscribe, that would be great. If you need 2 days free behind the RotoWire paywall, go to rotowire.com/try. We will talk to everybody soon. Have a great rest.